and welcome to Earth911's Sustainability in Your Ear. This is the podcast conversation about accelerating the transition to a sustainable carbon neutral society. And I'm your host, Mitch Ratcliffe. Thank you for joining the conversation. Transportation in the modern world doesn't make a lot of sense. We pay tens of thousands of dollars for vehicles that sit unused about 95% of the time and have designed our infrastructure based on population centers that get hardwired into our maps, preventing the evolution of flexible alternatives to the internal combustion engine. But now, with logistics and cloud technology, a vehicle can be a shared resource. Uber and Lyft proved that car use can be maximized by connecting a driver and someone in need of a ride or a delivery, but that model still relies on the idea of static ownership, and many alternatives are possible now that the digital infrastructure has matured. Our guest today is Ezra Goldman, co-founder and CEO of Upshift, a San Francisco-based company rethinking the car lease. They deliver cars for use on the days they are needed, and they reallocate them to other users when they would be otherwise sitting idle. The company is currently doing a fundraising campaign on WeFunder, a crowdfunding platform. Upshift hit its first goal, raising about $105,000 to accelerate its deployment of its fractional auto leasing of hybrid and electric vehicles in San Francisco. The WeFunder campaign will support their expansion into Washington, D.C. Ezra is an MIT graduate with a master's degree in urban planning, design, and mobile technology, and he studied for a PhD at the University of Copenhagen before starting Upshift. He's also spent 4 months as a Lyft driver in 2017, 5 years after he and his team launched Upshift. So he's obviously learned a lot, and we have a lot to talk about. You can learn more about Upshift at upshiftcars.com. Upshift Cars is all one word, no space, no dash. And you can check out the WeFunder campaign at wefunder.com/upshift. Welcome to the show, Ezra. How are you doing today?
Great. Thanks for having me today. I really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure to have you here. You have a really interesting background, a combination of a lot of different academic work that led up to launching Upshift in about a decade ago. Tell us about the journey. How did you end up coming up with the idea of fractional auto leasing? What were the things you were doing that got you here?
Yeah, well, when I was at Reed in 1999, I co-founded a dockless bike share, basically just put some bikes out and painted them. And it was widely popular. So I learned a lot from that. And then in 2006, when I was at MIT doing my master's in city planning, I had an opportunity to work on designing a shared electric scooter back in 2006, custom building it from scratch, robot wheels, drive-by-wire. Is a very unique vehicle. And then I worked on a variety of different projects, consulting for Fortune 500s on innovation and their strategy, as well as getting the opportunity to work on a startup in Denmark for a couple of years, managing that. And then I worked on a variety of different projects that were in the new mobility space. So I actually was interviewing taxi drivers in 2008 about whether or not they would want to have an app to get a ride hailed and make mobile payments, which unsurprisingly, yes, that would be good, something they wanted. Back in 2012, I was pitching people in San Francisco about whether they would pay me $10 to take a ride across town, and they all said yes to that too. And I was working on a peer-to-peer car share initiative around 2009. I had a team actually and a business plan. Didn't end up pursuing it because I decided it wasn't what I wanted to focus on, but and then was even pitching Google on, essentially a shared micro autonomous vehicle back in 2011. So I've been kind of kicking the can in the space for a long time, and all those ideas I thought were really cool, but none of them really seemed like they replaced car ownership. And essentially what I was doing at the time was asking people what I thought was a fairly simple question: why do you own a car? Which surprisingly, if you kind of look at the literature and you look at all the articles in the press and all that, nobody's really asking. They kind of make a lot of assumptions about why people own cars, but nobody's actually gone out and actually asked people that. And so what I found is that as I was asking people, look, we've got rideshare and car share and everything you could imagine, and yet it's impossible to find a parking space in a city like San Francisco. What do you got a car for still? And the answer was pretty much the same from everybody. It was like, well, there's something I'd like to do that requires having a car, or is almost impossible to do without a car. And I like to do it on a somewhat regular basis. And that's why I have a car. So yeah.
Well, so Lyft and Uber have grown on the assumption that somebody needs to own a car and then share it. What did you learn from their rises and their falls over the last decade as you watched that drama play out?
Well, to be perfectly honest, I never put my stock in Lyft and Uber or the peer-to-peer model. That was why I didn't build it in the first place a decade ago when I started working on it. It's been very clear to my mind that fleets are the future, that eventually you're going to have a lot of technology that's going to need to be integrated into the vehicle. So this is the telematics solutions, as well as at the moment we're working on teleoperations integration into the vehicle. So remote control car delivery, essentially. The telematics is for not just data off the car, but actually command and control. So locate, unlock, and drive the vehicle via mobile app and push button start, no keys. And then, of course, once you get to full AV, you don't see Cruise and Waymo doing peer-to-peer. We can discuss Elon Musk and his approach, but I don't think there's a lot of stock there. I think it's pretty clear to me that that has to be a fleet of vehicles that are fully equipped with a tremendous amount of technology.
Fleet ownership is an interesting approach to think about our all of our transportation problems. Obviously, bus companies, for instance, or municipalities already treat things that way, but this involves stewardship of a whole lot of materials, which you can manage the entire life cycle of in order to lower its environmental footprint, as well as ensure that it's all recycled or reused in the long term. What is Upshift's? Tell us about Upshift's business model at the highest level, not how customers interact with you, but how are you planning to grow the company?
Yeah, we're actually working with car makers to source the vehicles directly and essentially lease them through the automakers so that we have them off our books and we reduce our holding cost. And we have a fairly complex arrangement that we're working through now with a particular automaker who I'm not inclined to disclose exactly who it is, but working on something pretty exciting that will also have some backing from a regional government to ensure that the financing is guaranteed, and that'll enable us to kind of really get the next iteration of growth, probably about 5x our current scale. So I think the opportunity is really, as I see it, is car makers have they like making cars, they like selling cars. That's kind of their game. They are not so much into running operations, and neither are dealerships for that matter. And so they kind of want to get into the space, but don't really have somebody on the front end to like innovate, build the technology, manage the customer support, figure out the business model, build all the basically just all the infrastructure that is required. So I think that's where a startup can really move quickly and innovate and try new things. And they can provide, I'm not building a car. That's not, I mean, I'd love to, that would be a fun project, but it's not my game.
You build lease structures.
I believe, yeah, I'm basically a business model innovator, I would say, is kind of the thing that is really my sweet spot. I mean, I know all aspects of the company and literally everything about car ownership needs to be innovated in order to make the future really happen. I mean, the insurance piece, the finance piece, the service model and operations piece, the vehicle itself, frankly, I would argue needs to be redesigned. So it's really an exciting time to really be in this space because everything has to change.
So tell us, how does the fractional leasing process work? Is it, from the consumer's perspective, very different from qualifying for an auto lease?
Well, there's no qualifying. We don't run credit checks. You essentially sign up, put in your credit card and driver's license. We run a background check on your driver's license to make sure that you have a clean driving record. And we process your credit card for the payments, but we don't run a credit check. So that makes it actually a lot more accessible to people who otherwise would not qualify. In particular, we've seen a lot of foreigners who come into San Francisco, where we currently operate, and they're here for maybe 1, 2, 3 years, and they want to explore California, and they need a car to do that, and they can't go and lease a car because they don't have any credit because they just got here. So they're professionals. They're working at some big tech company, maybe even fairly senior in some cases, but they don't have any credit. So they can sign up for Upshift and get a car in the same day and be off. And so that's been actually great for us.
What kind of cars do you lease?
We have it's all hybrid and electric. So we started with the Prius only, then we added the RAV4 hybrid, which is very popular, and then we have recently started adding electric vehicles. So we're still exploring what the best EV will be for the platform, but we currently have a Model 3 and Ioniq 5 from Hyundai on the platform.
Now, from a practical perspective, how does the customer get a car and return a car in the midst of their regular usage? What's that process like?
Yeah, so they subscribe for 4, 8, or 12 days a month of use. So it's about 1 to 3 days of use. It sort of slots in between, say, a car share or rental car solution for someone who basically never drives except maybe to go to the grocery store and go on a holiday a couple of times a year. And then somebody who drives every day. We're kind of in the middle where somebody wants a car like, a couple times a week. This is sort of a good solution for them. In terms of how it works, essentially you just book through the app. You can actually personalize your vehicle and your experience. So you can name your car, which is kind of fun. You can, even though it's not really the same car every time, but it's
actually that's important to my wife. She has a name for every car.
Yeah. I mean, it's how do we make a shared mobility solution feel like a solution, feel like a car you own? And nobody even explored that, let alone actually tried to implement anything. So the other thing we do is we deliver it the way that you like it. So we set up the radio station, the temperature, the drive mode, the phone cable that you like is plugged in. All of that is kind of preloaded, and you can set that in your preferences. You can also get accessories, so dog cover, surfboard rack, snow chains. So think of it kind of like a garage that has multiple cars in it, and you have all your accessories next to it, and you can your car is always the way you left it when you got out of it. You don't have to do all the presets when you get in, and if you have a dog,
and it's brought to you.
And it's brought to you, of course. That's the sort of key piece here. So you make your booking request through the app. Most people are booking in advance. They have a little calendar app, and then the car gets delivered to you sometime before your booking, oftentimes well before your booking. So we don't do key exchange with the new telematics system that we're integrating now, and the member can just locate, unlock, and drive via the app keylessly.
Okay. All right.
When they're done, they just park it and walk away somewhere within their neighborhood.
And then someone from your team comes and gets it.
Correct. And they need to give us at least an hour or overnight if they park it late at night. But usually we're basically just stacking up deliveries and pickups as our most optimized for our team because we don't have to meet in person. So that creates a lot of flexibility in our model.
Okay, so I'm hearing some of the scooter innovation, sharing lessons that you learned a decade ago. That's really interesting. Now, so
2 decades ago, if I date myself.
Okay, so all right, you're admitting your age. What about when we think about scalability, for instance, in computing now, you can use a lot.
Pull back on that. It's interesting because some of the stuff I learned in 1999. I don't think, you really solve with new technology. I mean, the same problems are there, right? Distribution, for example, right? Like we had this problem where we have some hills on our college campus. Well, where do the bikes all end up? They all end up at somebody's dorm room, like at the bottom of the hill, and then you got to bring them back again, right? Now you can have telematics on your scooter or whatever, and it will beep at you and say, you can locate it, be like, it's at the bottom of the hill. You still have to send somebody over there and pick it up, right? Vandalism, theft. I mean, all of these things are sort of part of the business, whether you have fancy tech or not. So I learned a ton actually on that project.
Well, so that's the idea of 3 levels of use. But let's say somebody wants to use the car more than they are currently leasing for, but only for a month. Can you scale up and scale down like in cloud computing?
Yeah, so we do have a 3-month minimum commitment for upgrades and downgrades, just because it's hard we can't scale our fleet that fast. So we kind of want to have people, and also we found that if we don't set a cap, people sometimes they'll try to toggle back and forth like month to month, and it gets really hard to manage. So we do have a 3-month cap, but we do see people definitely will upgrade and downgrade. They'll pause if they're traveling for a month. So we definitely do see that.
Now, what is your San Francisco? You're in San Francisco now. What is the user base like, and how much do they tend to use the vehicles? Do they fully utilize the leased time, or is there breakage?
There is breakage. I would say it's person to person. So on average, most people use most of their days by far. But there's some people who sign up and just like the fact that it's there and they don't actually use it all that much. And then there's other people who really optimize and use every single one of their days. But on average, people are going a little more than once a week, I would say. Certainly the people trend towards the lower cost plans, understandably.
Do they shop? Do you know what they do when they're using the car?
Really boring stuff. That's sort of the takeaway. People do car things with cars. So what we found is that we actually did stick our cars on peer-to-peer platforms for a little while, and we found that those people have 2 use cases: grocery runs, big box stores, and like stuff all your friends in the back of the car and go to Napa or Tahoe or, some big longer road trip once in a while. Very infrequent. Maybe you do that once a year and you run grocery runs like maybe once a month, right? Now our members are a little different in that they typically have like an anchor use case.
Okay.
And that anchor use case is one obvious one is hybrid work. So we have a lot of people who now are going into the office 1 or 2 days a week and on a pretty recurrent basis. And maybe they don't want to ride transit, or it's just very inconvenient for them. They certainly don't want to lease a car that they're driving into the office once or twice a week. So that's been really good for us. And then, of course, on the weekends, we're very popular with a lot of outdoor activities. Mm-hmm. So anything you want to do that involves getting out into nature, basically impossible without a car. So you want to go hiking, surfing, skiing, golfing, literally you name it. If it's out in the woods, you're not going to be able to get there. So that's something that people like to do on the weekends. Having a dog is another driver for people. So you want to take your dog for a walk. Most of the other platforms don't allow dogs. We actually bring a dog cover. So that's been very popular. And then same with snow chains to go to Tahoe. That's a big, and surf racks. So, that kind of all facilitates this outdoor lifestyle for a lot of people here in the Bay Area. And then if you have some relative or partner that is close to you, maybe your girlfriend or boyfriend or fiance, et cetera, lives an hour away and you want to see them on the weekends, for example, or maybe your parents live, an hour away. So these are use cases we've seen that people have, and these kind of drive people to do infrequent but recurrent trips, not non-daily.
This is really interesting because what you're describing is a very high touch, almost concierge-like experience. I need tire chains this week. It's not something that one would expect from a lease, which is typically minimal. They don't have that much sense of engagement. I want to talk a lot more about how you do this, but we're going to take a quick commercial break. We'll be right back. And we are back to continue the conversation with Ezra Goldman, co-founder and CEO of fractional auto leasing innovator Upshift. Ezra, tell us how you tell people that fractional leasing makes sense, and where do you see the overlaps in the way people traditionally use cars and the way that they can begin to use cars with Upshift?
Yeah, so somewhere around the order of half of all cars in America are being driven less than 10,000 miles per year, and about a quarter of them are being driven only a few days a week. Now, these people, if you're lucky enough to be in a big city and you're on the sort of the lower end of the spectrum, you do have some options there. Obviously, there's rental car and car share you can kind of cobble together and make work. But what we find is that the people doing that are driving less than 1,000 miles per year and even less than 300 to 500 miles per year. And then there's just this massive gap between that and leasing and owning, which tends to be like, on average, I think is at 13,500 miles a year. I mean, there's just a huge gap between 1,000 and 13,000 miles. Or even 10,000 miles, which is the cheapest lease. That's really not, it's just nobody's even looking at as a place to solve. And you have more cars than licensed drivers. There's something like 10 more cars than you could even possibly drive at the same time. And that's millions and millions of cars, and so, and if you're not in a big city, you're in, say, Phoenix or a suburban market or somewhere that's lower density and isn't one of these sort of top 10 metros, you really have nothing. I mean, you're basically just left with, you can buy a used car, I guess, but you don't have any option other than owning a car if you want to have access even part of the time. And so that's really what I think is exciting, is that if I look at all the stuff that I've worked on in the last 2 decades, really in the space, all of it is really kind of focused on sort of a similar demographic in cities. And that is kind of the low hanging fruit that we're targeting as well, sort of 20, 30 something, in our case, more 30 something, I said 20 something professional living in a city like San Francisco. I mean, that's kind of your sweet spot for most of these solutions. We also see empty nesters because it's San Francisco. But, as soon as you leave that kind of core demo, most of these models sort of fall apart. Like you just don't see them really working. And I think what's exciting about what we're doing is we've seen demand everywhere in America. I mean, you name your city, like we've had people request that we expand there, and places that I never would have ever put on the roadmap, little tiny towns I'd never even heard of, suburban outskirts of some 100,000 person town in the middle of nowhere. And you're just like, how did you even hear about us, let alone want us to come there? And I think that's what's really exciting is you say, wow, this could really be the future of leasing, not just yet another kind of urban shared mobility solution.
Well, so that raises the practical question or the financial savings question. How does the cost of your lease compare to a traditional lease? How much can somebody save by adopting a fractional approach to leasing?
Yeah, so it'll be market to market, but in San Francisco, of course, the cost of ownership is quite high. I mean, we're trying to start in sort of the easiest place, so to speak, places where it's exceedingly hard to park a car. It's expensive to buy a garage here. It's like $350 a month just for a garage. So in many cases, it's cheaper to do Upshift than it is just to get a garage for a car. But and then here in San Francisco, it's another I'd say close to $200 on average for your insurance if you want full coverage. And then a lease now is averaging about $600 a month. So by the time you factor all just those three costs in, you're over $1,000 a month. So and our plan started at $299 all in. That's everything except for, so that's delivery and insurance included in that. Also, we take it in for routine maintenance. If there's some kind of damage on the car, we take it into the shop and get it fixed. You get another car to drive while it's in the shop, so you don't have to worry about that. So it's it'll save you up to 75% on the lowest plan, and then even on the higher plan, you're probably saving about 25% over what you would otherwise pay is our expectation. And then, of course, the pricing might adjust as we go to other markets where you might have different labor costs or different costs of various kinds.
I assume that the user has to pay for gas. Is that correct?
Yeah. Sorry, they pay for gas and charging in the case of EVs, and then they pay for bridge tolls, which we have a fair number here.
Okay. Now, you mentioned technology earlier, and there's a lot of innovation going on, particularly in logistics and in fleet management.
Yep.
How much does Upshift need to develop its own technology, or is most of the capability which needs to be assembled available off the shelf?
Yes, is the answer. We've taken as much as we can off the shelf, but ultimately we've spent years building just a tremendous amount of custom technology for what we're doing. So, for example, when we initially launched the company, we realized that we wanted to get into a subscription model, but we were worried about how do we guarantee availability and how do we just do the logistics, which will be complicated to do the delivery. So we just did $99 a day, get a Prius delivered. And that was very popular. It just wasn't replacing car ownership. And so it wasn't really that exciting to me. And so we pivoted to the subscription model. We had to reinvent every single thing about the company, all the technology, all the marketing materials, all the operations. The customer base completely changed. We lost every one of our customers. So it's really a fundamentally different business. The managing the days, that's like its own universe of complexity of just like, how do you make sure the days get applied properly and get expired properly, and if you mess something up, people definitely let you know if there's a bug in there and you did something wrong. So there's definitely a lot of complexity there to make sure that that's all working seamlessly. And then there's the logistics component has a tremendous amount of complexity. So right now, the user flow, I think that I mentioned before, the ability to name your car, personalize all your settings, set up all your bookings on a calendar, all of that is custom built. And that, we really wanted to make it feel like your car as opposed to a rental car, or, you don't see like 500 cars on a page and you pick the closest one. You don't see prices of any of the cars. Like, it's the whole user experience there is really different. And, it's really focused on just like, these are your, couple of cars in your garage. They're always available. When do you want it? That's basically the way it's structured. And then there's, on the back end side, when they set up the booking request, we actually have a whole logistics and dispatch backend that we've developed where we can assign jobs to the delivery people, which we call concierge. Funny you used that word earlier. And essentially they get their own app where they can manage each one of their jobs. So they'll see the 10 things they have to do that day, and they'll click in on one of those jobs and it tells them like, pick it up here, bring it there, clean it, enter the mileage, do all the damage report flow with photographs, tell the member where you parked it, send them a text message about where you parked it. All of that is done in the app, and then all the data comes back into our backend system. And so now we have, 1 million miles worth of booking data that are coming off of that. Then we have all the telematics data that's coming off. We've got, probably 750,000 data points from telematics data just in the last couple of years. and now what we're trying to build out is predictive analytics to say, okay, what's the likelihood that member X is going to want a car tomorrow at 7:00? And
well, that raises a question. How much are you utilizing the vehicles as compared to the vehicle that's parked 95 or more percent of the time?
we're currently at about 50% occupancy. I would, in by which I mean by reservation time, not necessarily.
Yeah, not actual use.
Yeah, well, I mean, somebody has possession of the car on a booking. Obviously, they're not going to drive it 24/7 while they have it, but
right.
In terms of actually like out on in member possession, it's about 50%. I think we can drive that to 75%, mainly through more midweek use. There's some friction point right now, primarily around the fact that our operating hours aren't super early in the morning, and so we have to drop it off the night before, and there's a little bit of just getting people to understand how that works is something that we're working on right now. But that's where I think we can kind of, I don't think we'll get to like 85, 90% like a rental car fleet would. I think that's hard to manage that level of utilization and still maintain an availability guarantee, which we have. So if we don't have a car, we're going to pay for you to go to a competitor so that you can still get to where you're going. But we don't want to do that all the time. It's not a great experience, and it's obviously not the business model. So I think that there's going to be a cap on kind of our max, probably like, in the sort of 75% range.
How many people are involved in operating the San Francisco program? Are they employees with benefits, or do they tend to be gig workers doing the pickups and management of the vehicles?
We do not employ gig workers. I actually, when I was bootstrapping the company, I drove for Lyft and Uber and worked on TaskRabbit, and I had such a miserable experience on those platforms from that end of the spectrum that I just was like, wanted nothing to do with gig work at all. Happy to discuss some details on that, but like I feel like it's very exploitative, essentially. So we have W-2 workers. We've had some that have been with us for, I don't even know, like 5 or 6 years and have like equity in the company. We have people who have been with us for, our newest employee started last summer. So that was like 9 months ago or something, maybe more.
And roughly how many people in San Francisco are working?
We actually have 2 people full-time and 1 person part-time doing all of our delivery work right now.
Wow. Okay. That's highly efficient.
It's extremely efficient. And, we keep them moving, 8 hours a day. They go out there and they some days they only get a half day shift depending on what's going on. And if there's nothing to do, like there's not really any, if all the cars are out, then there's actually nothing to do. But yeah.
Now you're doing the WeFunder campaign right now. You're seeking to raise $2 million overall, and part of that will be through the WeFunder campaign. And you were, the last time I looked, you were at about 105,000 raised from WeFunder. Your revenue in San Francisco spiked in Q3 of 2022, growing about 100%. What happened? Tell us about what's going on inside the company for those of us who might be considering investing.
Yeah, well, we actually refreshed our fleet, upgraded to some new vehicles, and sold off some of our old vehicles around that time. And the market was super hot right then. So we had actually bought these Priuses for $28,000 that we ran for 3 years, and then we sold them for $26,000. So we only spent $2,000 to hold those cars for 3 years of operations. So the market has been really good for us on that side. So that was kind of a good windfall for us.
And so that was the source of that spike in revenue, is that you were selling off.
That was a lot of it. Yeah.
Now, when you finish the raise, you want to triple your revenue. What are you going to be doing with the money you're raising, and where are you going?
Well, a lot of it is just marketing. I mean, we've been running pretty much organic, word of mouth, and we're still getting twice as many people signing up last month as the month before, with no marketing whatsoever. We actually had to put a wait list up because we were like unable to meet the demand.
Good problem to have.
Good problem to have, yeah. So now that's why we're scaling up with this car manufacturer partner and raising more money, and then pushing more marketing out so we can actually really scale the company. Well,
and you want to move into DC, as I understand it.
Yeah, we're also looking at the DC market. We think is kind of like the next closest market to the San Francisco area. It's sort of similar in size and scope and demographic. You have a lot of people who are very transient from all over the place who come there for a year or two, and
a lot of the foreigners you were talking about.
A lot of foreigners, so it's I think it's a good market. Historically it's been a good market for new mobility of all flavors as well. So I think that's a good market for us.
How much more is funding is open for WeFunder participants?
I believe the cap is set at 437,000. So there's another 330,000 available, and it's set to close on the 30th of April. So there's just a few days left.
Okay. Ezra, this is a really interesting story. Obviously, there's going to be a lot developing. How can folks keep track of what Upshift's doing? Maybe even send in their requests for service availability in their area.
Yeah, so you can find more at our website at upshiftcars.com, and the WeFunder campaign is at wefunder.com/upshift.
Well, Ezra, thank you very much for spending time with us today. It's been really interesting.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Great questions, and I really appreciate it.
We've been speaking with Ezra Goldman, co-founder and CEO of Upshift, which currently offers fractional auto leasing in San Francisco, and of course is raising money on WeFunder. You can learn more about Upshift at www.upshiftcars.com. Upshift Cars is all one word, no space, no dash. Upshiftcars.com, and about Upshift's WeFunder campaign at wefunder.com/upshift. Transportation, as I said in the introduction, doesn't make a lot of sense today. We've oversupplied ourselves with mobility, parking cars 20 or more times longer than we use them in any given week. As we transition to electric vehicles, rethink the ownership and management of vehicles, and recalibrate our cities and towns for a different, more flexible mobility, there will be an economic, social, and political upheaval that will take place all around us, bubbling up and from the top down. It is going to be an extraordinary time. Perhaps we can actually reinvent our society for sustainability. Who knows? But the benefits will be tangible, and Upshift's concierge approach to supporting its customers is an example of rethinking how physical goods and service can merge to deliver a more luxurious and sustainable experience of getting around town or taking a vacation. It's interesting that Ezra has traversed the scooter and shared vehicle industries over the years. From bike and scooter sharing to offering rides across town, his personal journey led him away from the idea that we have to own and control our vehicles. Technology has advanced enough that vehicles can be shared as a personalized service. And services, the largest and still growing sector of the economy, will be layered into every physical asset to transform our stewardship of materials. A fleet owner is in a far better position to ensure that a car or any other new form of e-vehicle is cared for and recycled to make the next generation of transportation. It's, as I said, an extraordinary time, but if I were an auto dealer, I'd be looking at my service department as the future of my business. Would you take a few minutes to share this podcast or any of the more than 390 other interviews we produced on sustainability in your ear? I would certainly appreciate it if you would take a moment to write a review on your favorite podcast platform. You folks are the amplifiers that spread more ideas so we create less waste. So please tell your friends, family, and coworkers that they can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, or any of the other fine purveyors of podcast goodness they prefer. Thank you so much for your support. I'm Mitch Ratcliffe. This is Earth911. We will be back with another innovator interview soon. In the meantime, folks, take care of yourself, take care of one another, and let's all take care of this beautiful planet. Have a green day.